Gittin Daf Zayin continues the Gemara's discussion of the Churban of Yerushalayim, relating the incidents that happened surrounding it, and some other Agadah Gemaras as well. The Gemara is specifically in the middle of talking about Onkelos, as Onkelos, when he was a Roman, was considering converting to join Klal Yisrael, and he was using a kishuf, he was using witchcraft to raise people from the dead, to ask them about the next world. So we've already discussed that he spoke to Titus. Now the Gemara says that he raised Bilam and he spoke to him, and he asked him the same things. He said, who is important, who is chashuv, who is respectable in the next world. Bilam also answered Yisrael. So Uncle said, should I join them? Bilam quoted a pasuk referring to Moav, who said, don't help them or seek their good or peace all the days. So meaning he was saying no. So Uncle said, and what is your punishment? And Bilam said, I'm being boiled every day in boiling zera, and this was because of what he did with the Menos Midian. So Uncle then went and he raised someone which is called the sinner of Yisrael, the Poishe Yisrael. And he asked him, who's Chashvan the next world? And they said, Yisrael. He said, should I join them? And he said, Tivasam Durosh, seek their benefit. Don't seek their harm. Anybody who harms them is like he pokes himself in the eye. So he's hurting only himself. So Uncle says, and what is your punishment? He said, I am punished every day with boiling waste matter, and this is because I made fun of the words of the Chachamim. It says whoever makes fun of the words of the Chachamim is punished in boiling waste matter, and this supports that. Now the Gemara points out, look at the difference between the Nevi'im of the nations of the world and the sinner of Klal Yisrael, that the Nevi'im of the nations of the world was willing to say, don't help the Jews, while the sinner of Yisrael was willing to say, he said, help the Jews. Now, the Gemara just wraps up what it said about Kamsa and Bar Kamsa. The Gemara says, Rabbi Elazar says, look how great is the power of being shamed, that HaKadosh Baruch Hu would help Bar Kamsa in his plot to destroy the Beis HaMikdash just because he had been subject to shame. Okay, now this Gemara started by mentioning three incidents. The Gemara has already discussed one, that of Kamsa Bar Kamsa. Now the Gemara wants to discuss the second one, that of the rooster and the hen, which destroyed Har HaMelech, what's called Tur Malka. So the Gemara says that in that area, which was a part of Yehuda, they had a custom that when they brought a chassan and a kala to the wedding, they would bring a rooster and a hen in front of them. They would say, be fruitful and multiply like chickens. So one day while this procedure, which was very important to them, was happening, Romans were coming and they saw them and they grabbed away the chicken and the hen. So the people were very upset, and they had many more people than the Roman soldiers that were there, and they fell upon those Romans and they attacked them. And of course, it got back to the Caesar, and the Caesar was told that the Jews are making a rebellion against you. So he roared his army and he came to Har-Melech, and he was going to attack them there. But there was one Jew among them who was called the one from the south. He was so strong that he could jump a mill and kill a bunch of Roman soldiers. So Caesar saw that he was going to lose to this guy, so he decided to pray. He took off his crown, put it on the ground, and he said, Master of the universe, if it pleases you, don't put me into this person's hands. And then that person, the one from the south, he went and he did a sin on himself, and he said, Hashem, we don't need you. Leave us alone, we'll be fine. He said, you, our God, has forsaken us. Don't come forth with us. So you see, he said, I don't need you, and if you ever do that, forget it. It's bad news. So Gemara asks, but this is a pasuk and a Tehillim. So the Gemara answers, the pasuk in Tehillim was said as a question, it was being facetious, as if to say, have you forsaken us? Why do you not come to our aid? He was asking for aid, as opposed to here where he was saying, I don't need your help. So what ended up happening was that this person from the south went into the bathroom, and a snake came and disemboweled him, and that was the end of him. He died from that. So when Caesar saw that, he said, since a miracle happened to me, I'm going to leave the Jews alone. And he left them, and he went, and they jumped with joy. They ate and they drank, they made a Suda, but they did not seem to give a chesed to HaKadosh Baruch Hu for it. They thought that Caesar was afraid of them. They lit so many candles that a person a mile away could read his signet ring. When Caesar saw that they were celebrating, he said, oh, they're celebrating over me. They think they beat me. And he went around and he attacked them again, and this time he killed them out. And Rav Assi says he came with 300,000 sword-wielding soldiers up to Har-Melech and killed the people for 3 days and nights. That was all one side of the mountain. The other side of the mountain, they had no idea what was happening, and they continued singing and dancing. Now, how many people were in Har Melech altogether? So the Gemara quotes the pasuk in Iyov, Bila ad Hashem lechamal eis kol ne'os Yaakov. He consumed without pity all the dwellings of Yaakov. So Ravin learns that there were 600,000 towns there. That's what's referred to in this pasuk, and that Yanai had 600,000. That is, King Yanai had 600,000 towns in Har Melech. And Yehuda and Ravasi, they were, and each one had a population as great as the people came out of Mitzrayim, meaning 600,000 people, except for 3 towns that had twice as many people. Those 2 towns were called Kfar Bish, Kfar Shechalayim, and Kfar Dechraya. The Gemara explains these names are all negative. Bish means bad. People were called that because they did not feed others. They did not help people traveling. Kfar Shechalayim, they made their living by selling Shechalayim, which is cress. Kfar Dechraya is the city of the men, because there they only had boys. They had the boys first, and then if they had a girl, they didn't have children anymore. And that was a negative thing. Having girls is a bracha. The Gemara now discusses that there was some discussion about how big this Tur Malka really is. Ula says, I saw it and it wasn't even big enough to hold 600,000 reeds, let alone 600,000 towns. Was it Tzeduki that said, your Chachamim are lying, there's not enough room there for 600,000 towns? And Rav Chanina answered, it's called Eretz HaTzvi, the land of the deer, because it's just like a deer. Just like when you take the skin off a deer, it immediately shrinks and it's no longer large enough to fit its body. Eretz Yisrael, as soon as you take its inhabitants out, it contracts, and it'll only expanded to fit them, and therefore it'll not look like it was able to fit them any longer. The Gemara now moves on to speak about another town that was destroyed by the Romans. This one is a conversation in Rav Menyumi Bar Chilkiah and Rav Chilkiah Bar Tuvia and Rav Huna Bar Chi were sitting together. They said, we heard it was a town called Kfar Schania of Mitzrayim. It was destroyed by the Romans. We'd like to know if it was a town of Tzadikim or Shem. If anybody knows anything about it, please fill us in. So one of the Chachamim stood up to speak, and he said, I'll tell you a story that happened there. There was a man who was Nisares, had Erison to his wife. The town was captured by the Kchavim, and they married this man and his wife together, meaning they did chuppah. And the wife said, please don't touch me because we don't have a ksuba, and the halacha is there's an Isser Bia without a ksuba. So he didn't touch her, and that was their entire life together until he died. After he died, she told the people at the funeral, say a real good hesped for this person who destroyed. He was able to chat away his Yetzer Hara even more than Yosef Tzaddik. Yosef Tzaddik only had to face Yetzer Hara one day. He had to face Yetzer Hara every single day of his married life. Yosef Tzaddik didn't sleep in the same bed as the object of his Yetzer Hara, but this man, he did. And Yosef did not have the object of his Yetzer Hara be his own wife. And here, the problem here was his wife himself, was his temptation. So you see the tzidkus of the people of this town of Sachania. Now, another one of the Chacham spoke, and he said there was a story there that happened where the grain in town ordinarily cost 40 selah. If for 40 sah of grain would be purchased for 1 dinar, but the price went up, and now 1 dinar only was able to buy 39 sah. So this was a terrible problem for all the people of the town. Well, it was a small problem, at least, for all the people of the town, and they considered that there was an avera that must have happened that caused this. So they went and they did a search, and they discovered that there was a father and a son that had bia with an Ar HaMarasa on Yom Kippur. So they brought them all to court, and they stoned the father and the son, and lo and behold, the price of grain went back down. And the third story was said by another one of the Chachamim. He said that there was a man in that city who wanted to give his wife a divorce, but he didn't want to have to pay her ksuba. So he went and invited his friends, and he got his friends and his wife drunk and put them together in the bed, and then he took the white of an egg and put it on the mattress between them so that it looked like zera, and then he called witnesses to say, look what happened over here, that they had done as nos, and therefore he claimed that he didn't owe her the ksuba. But there was a Tam Chacham there, one of the Tamidim of Shammai Hazaken. His name was Vava ben Buta, and he said, hold on a second, it might be egg white. Here's how you tell: if you put it near fire, egg white will contract, but zera will flow away. So they checked it, and they indeed discovered that it was egg white. And they brought that man to court, and they gave him malchus and took away her ksuba from him, meaning he had to pay the ksuba. Now, the Roshim discussed how this proves the tzidkus of Kfar Sachanaya, but the Gemara assumes that it does. So the Gemara says, in case you have these three stories, why were they punished if they were so chashuv? So the Gemara explains because they did not properly mourn for Yerushalayim. It says, Simchas Yerushalayim v'gilu ba kol yavel sisu ita masois kol misablim aleha. If you rejoice when Yerushalayim is rejoicing, it's good. And if you rejoice when Yerushalayim is in mourning, that is bad, and you can end up with something to mourn over. Now the Gemara discusses the third story with which we introduced this whole sugya, and it says that the story of the side of a carriage caused the destruction of Beitar. So the Gemara says, what was that? In Beitar, they had a custom that when a baby was born, they would plant a tree. If it was a baby boy, they would plant a cedar tree. If it was a baby girl, they would plant a pine tree. And when a boy and girl got married, they would cut down their respective tree and use it to make the chuppah. Now, what happened that one day the daughter of the Caesar was riding through the area and her carriage broke. And so her servants cut down one of the trees for one of the boys, the cedar trees, in order to fix the carriage. And this was a very special tree. People were very upset about it, so they attacked them. And the Romans went and reported to Caesar, and Caesar said the Caesar was told that the Jews have rebelled against him. So he came to fight against Beitar, and it was a tremendous slaughter. Sumera quotes the pasuk in Eicha that says, "Gadab chari of kol keren Yisrael." He cut down with tremendous anger all the pride of Yisrael. So Rabbi Zera said this refers to the 80,000 generals who came to the city of Beitar when it was captured, and they killed men, women, children until their blood flowed all the way to the Yam HaGadol, which was 1 mil away. Gemara quotes a brisa. Rabbi Eliezer ben Horkinus, Rabbi Eliezer HaGadol, says that there were two rivers that branched off towards the Yam HaGadol, and each one was 2/3 blood and 1/3 water. There's another brisa that says that the blood of the Jews that were killed there flowed into the fields, and it fertilized the vineyards for 7 years and did not require any other fertilizer. The Gemara now discusses how much was the slaughter there. So one says, an old man in Yerushalayim told me that in one valley of Bezradin, who was the killer of the Babylonians, killed 2,110,000 people, and in Yerushalayim he killed 940,000 people until their blood touched the blood of Zechariah, the Zechariah HaKohen, that is Zechariah ben Yehuda, who was a Navi, who was killed in the Beis HaMikdash. On the floor of the Beis HaMikdash, the blood was there when it was touched by this blood. As it says, "V'damim b'damim nago," blood touched blood. Now the Gemara tells us the entire story of Zechariah. The Gemara doesn't mention that Zechariah was a Navi and a Kohen who was killed because he rebuked people for worshiping Yoash as an Avodah Zarah. It says that Nizradin came to the Beis HaMikdash 250 years later. He saw the blood of Zechariah bubbling on the floor of the Beis HaMikdash. So that's the kind of what's this? They said, it's just some spilled blood from the karbonis. So Nizradin brought blood of all the karbonis to compare them, and none of them matched up. So he said, that's not correct. You're lying to me. Tell me what it is, otherwise I'm going to tear your flesh apart with iron combs. So they said to him, what can we say? There was a Navi who used to rebuke us, and we rose up against him and we killed him, and his blood has not rested all this time. So Nizradin said, I'm going to appease it. He brought the Sanhedrin, the great Sanhedrin of 71, and the smaller Sanhedrois, and he killed them all with Zechariah's blood, and it didn't rest. He brought young boys and girls, and it didn't rest. He brought children, and it didn't rest. So Nizradin finally spoke to it, and he said, Zechariah, I killed the best of them. Do you want me to kill them all? And then the blood stopped. So when Nizradin saw that, he said, if this is a punishment for killing one person, then me, who has killed so many people, how much more am I deserving? And he ran away, and he did tshuva, and he sent a message to his household how to divide up his property, and he was Megayer. He converted. Now, having mentioned that, the Gemara quotes other enemies of Klal Yisrael that end up coming close. The Gemara says that Naaman, who was a Syrian noble, he himself was a Ger Toishav, which means that he lived in Eretz Yisrael and was makabel not to do Avodah Zarah. At least according to one opinion, that's the definition. The Gemara says also that Haman had grandchildren who learned Torah in Bnei Brak, Sisera had grandchildren who taught Torah in Yerushalayim, and Sancheiriv had grandchildren who taught Torah altogether. The Gemara says that is a reference to Shemaiah and Avitalion. Now, about the blood of Zechariah, the Gemara concludes that the supposing Nasati is Dama al Tzchiach Saleh Levilti He concise. I put its blood on a smooth surface of a rock so that it shouldn't be covered, not be absorbed into the ground. That refers to the incident with the blood of Zechariah. The Gemara now moves on to interpret psukim, which are references to the Churban. So the Gemara quotes Hakol Kol Yaakov Eidami de Esav. So the Gemara gives two pshatim in this. Hakol, the Gemara first says, refers to the massacre of the Jews at the hands of Adrianus, Caesar, Hadrian, who killed 1.2 million people, twice the number of people left Mitzrayim. Then it says Kol Yaakov refers to those killed by Aspasianus, that is Vespasian, in the city of Vetar, which was either 4 million or 40 million. And then this is Yadayim de Esav, that refers to the government of Rome, which destroyed the Beis Hamikdash, burned the Heichal, and sent us out of our land. Second explanation, Hakol Kol Yaakov says that there is no successful tefillah that does not have a Jew praying there. And Yadayim de Esav, there's no successful war that does not have a descendant of Esav praying there. Now, the Gemara has been discussing that the Lashon Hara spoken by Bar Kamsa is what led to the Churban. Gemara quotes a pasuk b'shoit Lashon Techavai, with when the tongue strikes, you should hide because the tongue can be very destructive. Now, more psukim, the Gemara says, Al nar es Babel shem yishavnu v'gam b'chinu b'zechenu Tzion, is a pasuk clearly describing the destruction of Yerushalayim. By the rivers of Babylon we sat and we cried when we remembered Zion. But this was written by David HaMelech, who was only alive before the first Beis Hamikdash was even built, let alone the second one destroyed, or the first one destroyed. As the Gemara explains, that Baruch Hu showed him in Nevuah the destruction of the first and second Beis Hamikdash, and that's how he wrote this. And it discusses the first and the second Beis Hamikdash. The first one he wrote Al nar es Babel shem yishavnu v'gam b'chinu, and the second one he wrote Zechar Shem Levnei Yadayim Yisrael Yisraelayim Harim Aru Adi Seiba. Remember Hashem the day of Yerushalayim for the descendants of Edom, for those who say destroy, destroy until the foundation. Next, the Gemara quotes the pasuk Alecha haragna kol hayom. The Gemara gives 5 explanations of this. What does this mean when it says, for your sake we are killed all the time? So the Gemara's first is the discussion of the 400 boys and girls taken during the Churban. The Gemara quotes Rami, or possibly a Tana, who says that there were 400 boys and girls who were taken in a ship to Rome. They understood that they were being brought for a forbidden promiscuous activity. And they said, what should we do? Should we drown ourselves so that we will get to Elam Haba? So the oldest one said a drasha. Says, Am Hashem Bashan Ashiv mi Mitzules. I will return from Bashan and I will bring them from Mitzules. So Bashan, he said, means Bain Shane, between the teeth of a lion I'll bring them. And Ashiv mi Mitzules means I will bring them back from the depths of the sea, and it will save them from the depths of the sea. So when the girls heard that, they all jumped into the water, and the boys said, the girls that were going to be forced to do something which is natural for them, although forced, they do this. Us, we were going to be forced to do something unnatural, certainly we should give ourselves up, and they also jumped into the sea as well. And this is the Gemara's first plat in the pasuk. Second explanation the Gemara says is the story of Chana and her 7 sons. The Gemara doesn't call her Chana, the Gemara just says a woman. So the Gemara says that a woman had 7 sons, and they were all brought to Caesar. And Caesar told each of them to bow down to an idol, and they each answered with a pasuk from the Torah. The first one said, the second one said, the third one said, fourth one said, fifth one said, Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. Sixth one said, V'yadatim v'shavais alevachi ki Hashem Elokim b'shamayim imhav v'ash milchas ein oid. And the last one said, as Hashem hamarta hayom v'Hashem hamircha hayom. Hashem singled you out today to be your God, and you singled Hashem out to be your God, and Hashem singled you out to be His people. And He said, we already swore they're not going to exchange, and He swore to us He will not exchange us. So, not happening. So Caesar was desperate to have somebody listen to him after he's up to son number 7. So he said, listen, I'm going to throw down my ring, bend down to pick it up, so people should at least think that you bow down. And the boy said, Nebuchadnezzar, you, Caesar, you are so concerned for your own kavod that people should think that I listen to you, how much more so do you have to be concerned for the kavod of Kadosh Baruch Hu? So they took him away to kill him. His mother said, give him to me for a minute, let me give him a kiss. And then she said, go tell Avram Avinu, he made 1 carbon on the Mizbeach, I made 7 karbanos. She also went up on the roof and she fell down and she died. And the Maskal said, Eim habanim samecha, the mother of the children is happy, at least in the end. Third pshat in the pasuk, Yoloch haragdim kol hayom. So the Gemara says, Yeshua ben Levi says this is a reference to bris milah, which is life-threatening, but we do it anyway, and the child is saved in the merit of the mitzvah. Fourth is that Talmidei Chachamim will teach halachos of shchita by showing it on themselves, not actually cutting their throats, but showing how it would look. And the Gemara says that is a life-threatening thing to do, and one should not do anything on himself. One can show anything on himself except for shchita and saras. And the fifth is Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, who says it's the Talmidei Chachamim who kill themselves to learn Torah. Like Shimon ben Lakish says, you only keep Torah, you only hold on to the words of Torah if you kill yourself over it. Like it says, Zayis Torah Adam Kiyamas Ba'ayal.